Good morning, eighth graders. So we are talking about overpopulation. So essentially, how is it that our continuous population of this planet is now affecting everything else? Okay, there is a point in which there are just too many people because of the amount of resources we have that are non-renewable or renewable here on Earth. So let's talk about some of these things. So we are primarily focusing in on science standard 3-4. And by the end of this, you should be able to identify the reasoning for population growth and explain how population growth is affecting our natural resources. So why is it that so many people are now affecting all of these non-renewable and renewable resources and what it's doing to our planet? So make sure you have your notes out in front of you and we will get going. So we're going to start with just a little activity, okay? Current human population. So what I'm going to have you do um, is I'm going to have you go to the worldometers.info/world-population, and I want you to see what is the current population of our Earth. Okay, this is actively updating as you get in. So yes, it's going to change by the time you write the 8 billion, um, all the way down until you get to the tens. Okay, do your best. Okay, so I quick took a screenshot, and this is our current human population as of 5:46 a.m. on Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. We are currently sitting at 8,221,332,696 people in our population. You will see right below it, we are looking at the amount of births today. So we're only about 6 hours into the day, and there's already been 87,000 births. You also get a death toll. So 41,000 people have passed. But we are still looking at a growth. So positive people in sort of a thing of 46,145 people. So if you take the births, you minus the deaths, we're still up 46,000 people for the day. You can also see like what's going on per the year. We're only in May. We're not even halfway through the year, and we are seeing births at 45,417,029 births for the year. Now, granted, about half deaths, 21,400,717 people have passed away. But we are still looking at a positive human growth of 24,016,312. Okay, so I want you to just write down what is the current population as of this moment. Okay, and then we'll come back to it. So if you need to pause me, come back, and we will keep going. Okay, so what is human overpopulation? So human overpopulation occurs if the number of people in a group exceeds the carrying capacity of a region occupied by the group. So we're kind of seeing this with West Fargo schools. Okay, we are overpopulated within our West Fargo schools to where we have had to add secondary buildings. So we reached capacity back in 2013. Well, actually, we reached capacity probably back in like 2010 at Cheney and West Fargo High. In order to combat that, in 2013, the 2013-14 school year, they opened up Liberty Middle School. Okay, and then it already reached capacity like within the second year of it being open. To where then just more recently we have opened, Heritage Middle School. So we are seeing that the number of people within the West Fargo School District has increased to the point of our single schools not being able to occupy them. So we then have to find solutions. So why does human overpopulation work or like happen? What's going on? This is where we see increase in births. So we have more people being born each and every day. We see a decline in mortality, meaning that fewer and fewer people are passing away due to old age or whatnot. We see an increase in immigration. So we see a lot of people moving into specific regions without a lot of people moving out. And then unsustaining or depleting our resources. So we have used our resources in West Fargo. We have like fit as many people as we can humanly fit in a certain zone. And we don't have a lot of people moving out because we have a lot of younger families who are staying and things like that. So like we can equate human overpopulation to West Fargo as much as we can the entire world. So all of this is happening primarily because of these four things being met. So an increase in birth, a decrease in mortality, an increase in immigration, and then unsustaining or depleting our resources. It happens. When you're trying to fit 8 billion of us, over 8 billion of us, on this planet, like there has to be something in the end that gives. So, that. Now, it has been about 7-ish minutes. I'm going to quick pause because I don't have this up yet. So you're going to see the screen change, but I'm going to quick pause. I'm going to go back. I'm going to take a new screenshot with time and date of our human population, and I want you to look at the difference. Okay, so this screenshot was taken at 5:55 a.m. on Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Now, this was 9 minutes of a difference. And you can see that our world population has increased to 8,221,333,909 people. That is a difference of 1,213 people. So our world population increased by 1,200 or 1,200 people in 10 minutes. Okay, the births today have gone up by 2,265 births. Deaths is about half, which I anticipated. But there have been an additional 1,082 people that have passed. Basically bringing our population growth up to 47,358 people. That's a difference in 10 minutes. We increased our overall population by 1,213 people. Like, how crazy? In 10 minutes, 1,000 more people were added. So, that is what is going on. What I want you to do is I want you to take the time, look at your numbers, because of course I'm recording this before school even starts. And some people might be listening to this next year. Who knows? Okay, I want you to look at what your current population is and the difference between them, because it is insane. But this is our world. So thank you for hanging out with me for whole group. If you are going to continue on with independent notes in lecture, phenomenal. I'm here for it. If you are moving on to one of the other options, fantastic. Just make sure that you take your time. Okay, awesome. Let me know if you have any questions. So, what increases human population? Essentially, what increases human population is technology advancements. We are constantly trying to find ways to prolong our lives, okay? Because it's human nature. No one wants to pass away. I mean, if I hit a certain age and I'm like done, please. But no, at the ripe old age of 34, I don't want to pass away. I want to do everything humanly possible to stay on this planet. So technologies advance. But with those advancements, we start to see some pressures on our global resources. We see ecological disruption as resources are depleting. We see the moving of resources, and this is all made possible because of advancements we have within certain areas. So primarily, the advancements within our agriculture. Okay, so tool making. Once like Neanderthals could make tools, it was game over. We were now apex predator. Okay, and then when we enter into the agricultural revolution, where we start seeing large farms starting to be put together, and then having the manpower in order to actually like do all the work on this is insane. So this is like the very large family farms. Okay, that's the agricultural revolution. And then we hit the industrial revolution, and it just exceeds all expectations. Now we start seeing advancements in tractors being available. We see that the average farm family doesn't need to have 12 kids anymore. They can do it with just 5, sort of a thing. Plus then overall health is increasing to where during the Industrial Revolution we start seeing that decrease in childhood mortality because we get things like vaccines and oh my goodness gracious, not steroids, antibiotics. Holy buckets. Okay, antibiotics. We see that like what once were childhood death sentences as far as diseases go no longer are. There's a reason why before kindergarten you get like I think it's like 10 different shots for vaccines. Okay, this is what happens once we start getting the right tools into the right places. We start seeing human population being able to thrive. Now, there are some misconceptions. That's what I'm looking for. So community supports leading to overpopulation. So back in the beginning stages of the Industrial Revolution, unfortunately, the odds were stacked against those in poverty. Okay. Typically, those families in poverty still ended up having multiple children with higher childhood death rates because they didn't have the availability or the access to these life-saving vaccines that doctors were now creating. But families being provided with further supports to ensure that poverty is the last option, where we start getting government support systems in place, start living in a higher socioeconomic status. Okay, so once we get things in place, social workers, food aid, things like that, we start seeing not only population increase, but we start seeing socioeconomic increase. So the difference between the lower class, the middle class, and the higher class starts to become more evident. We start seeing that those within the middle class or higher have access to being able to visit doctors, eating a better diet, and that then prolongs their life. Eventually to where you start getting the middle and higher classes where they're only having 1 or 2 children because they don't need to essentially have another one in case the first one passes because of childhood illness, and things like that. Like, it's such a gross, morbid sort of topic to think about, but this is where we started, so this is where we have to understand. So they fear childhood death far less because they're essentially starting to meet the needs that our bodies needed during this time. Um, so we start to see the discrepancies between the higher class, the middle class, and the lower classes. Okay, so this is where some of it starts. Then we start seeing, because of the development of things like ships, we start seeing immigration increase. You have people moving from underdeveloped countries or developing countries to more developed countries, which then you're adding more people to what was potentially already a kind of like teeter-totter effect of what resources do we have available. Um, so I think back to like when immigrants started coming in through New York, totally fine. But you essentially add a couple thousand people and you don't have the accessibility to all the farming produce and things like that from the Midwest quite yet, because it still has a delay time. Okay. Vehicles were not like they are today. And it's not like we could throw them on an airplane and just like boop from like North Dakota to New York. It doesn't happen like that yet. Okay. To where you start seeing what resources you do have starting to become more scarce. And then you start seeing a lot of overcrowding in major cities, which can also start to spread diseases more and things like that, to where you kind of have this balance. But eventually we figure it out to where immigrants have better opportunity to get out of just the east or west coast and move towards the Midwest, and things like that. So everything kind of builds on one another. But there are 7 major hindrances, things that we're starting to notice that because of our population size, we are seeing more and more concerns. Okay. So the effects of increased population, we start to see more pollution in the air. We start to see pollution of the water, over mining, deforestation. We then start hitting over hunting, and unsustainable farming. And then finally, all of this eventually just climaxes up to violence and aggression. Because if you, granted, you guys might have been too young, but even just for shutdown 5 years ago, like the people that were going after this toilet paper was ridiculous. So you see a scarcity in resources to where everybody's just on edge. So let's talk about this. So the increase in human population starts to increase our air pollution. Okay. We start to see economic development starting to increase our pollution. So we have more and more businesses being opened. We have more and more people moving to and from jobs and needing to get from home to their jobs and da 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 da, to where we see things in developing countries and in countries with like quite a lot of people. We see air pollution levels starting to relentlessly rise. And this is primarily due to things called like urbanization. You have people being able to move out of the city, still work in the city, but move out of the city and commute in. You have more people living in the city, one on top of the other. Hello, apartment complexes, and things like that, to where you start then needing more and more resources to heat a single home, to where then you start seeing energy consumption increasing, and like I said, the transportation and motorization increasing as well. People moving away from the city and working within. I mean, I live 20 minutes away from my home. Back before the Industrial Revolution, that was unheard of. If I lived this far away, I more than likely was working in a field because that's what I'm surrounded by. But because of the advancement of vehicles and things like that, I can live 20 minutes from my place of work and still get there within the day. Things like that. So I mean, public transportation is great, but you still have to run those buses. You still have to run those trains. It does cut down on the unnecessary. Thinking back to last summer when Mr. G and I went to Japan, there were hundreds of us in trains and thousands overall at like train stations. So if you think of each of those individual people driving a car versus all of us being crammed, not even like sardines, it was actually very pleasant on the trains, but crammed into a train, you are cutting down fuel emissions, but fuel emissions are still occurring. Okay, so increase in population starts to increase in our air pollution. So once we start increasing in population, we also start to see water pollution increasing, to where studies have been done showing that about 50% of the world's population live in regions around the globe that are considered water stressed. And what water stressed means is that the demand for water or fresh water, let's focus in on fresh water. The demand for fresh water exceeds the amount of fresh water that's actually available to said population. Um, so it would be like if 20 of us in a room need to drink 8 cups of water a day, because that's what like is recommended. So if you take 8 times 20, that's 160 cups, but we only have 140 cups available. That means that some of us are not going to meet the quota of 8 cups a day, just placing stress. So they have some access, but they don't have the entirety of the access. And they believe that due to the lack of water or the poor quality of water, the amount of pollution that's occurring by 2030, they suspect that like we start going into that water scarcity mark in those 50% regions. So where they are water stressed will become water scarce by 2030. So that's 5 years from now. That's a little daunting. Now, granted, this is an older article and I need to look and see what the current trend is looking like, but probably not great. So that a lot of our freshwater is going towards agriculture or producing the foods necessary for us to sustain this many humans. Grains are a staple no matter what culture you're in, whether it's rice or wheat or whatnot, to where we're seeing about 75 to 90% of our accessible freshwater going towards watering those crops instead of into the bellies of our people, to where we're expecting that some of our places are going to start feeling the stress at about 2050 about whether they have enough food or not. And we already have places that are stressed about whether they have enough food or not to sustain their population. So we just have that on top of it. And then finally, we have growths in regional and global populations that are just increasing the amount of like pollution that's happening. As of 2013, there is an estimated 780 million people who don't have access to safe drinking water. We've heard of Flint, Michigan. We have heard about the Middle East, like all that. So just people going without already. And this was back in 2013. Like y'all were just babies, not to mention where we are today. So water pollution is increasing the likelihood of us not having fresh water available to us. And this is due to many different things that we talked about during the water pollution unit. So yeah, those are some crazy things to keep in mind. So we just spoke about mining and overall like what we're looking for. So increase in human population then states that we basically need access to coal, oil, and natural gases because that's essentially what we run the world on, as crazy as that is. So adding more adding more to the population results in us needing to mine more and more coal, oil, and natural gases. And as we know, these are non-renewable resources, meaning that they are not able to be reproduced within one person's lifetime, and things like that, to where we are going to run out. Not to mention, over mining just contributes to everything else. It's the leading cause of global warming, mining and using of these resources, where we are starting to see melting polar ice caps, changing climate patterns, the rise in sea levels. Like, it's adding to it. And now the melting of the polar ice caps then attributes to the rise in sea levels because that water has to go somewhere. And what essentially starts to happen is we then start to lose land that people are able to live on. They project that if the polar ice caps keep melting at the rate that they are by like 2050-ish, basically Florida is inhabitable, meaning that there's not going to be enough land for people to actually live in Florida. So then we just increase that overpopulation of other cities that much more because all the people living in Florida currently are then displaced to somewhere else. Not to mention, at the same rate as Florida is being like flooded, so is the southern portions of Louisiana. Like, it just builds on top of each other. But because we rely so heavily on these non-renewable resources, we just continue to add to the problem. Because we continually are adding to our population, we need to put these people somewhere. Just as there are 1,213 additional people on this planet, there are 1,213-ish teenagers that are ready to move out of their homes, young adults who are ready to start their independent lives from their families. So it's not like we're still working within the same household blueprint, but now we're starting to expand from those households to where people need to go somewhere. And unfortunately, where that ends up happening is our forests. So deforestation is happening at a rate that is just insurmountable. And it's for many reasons. Primarily, deforestation is happening because we have large-scale commercial agriculture that needs to move in because we need food. We need beef product. We need like chicken. We need crops and things like that, to where large-scale agriculture is responsible for 40% of tropical deforestation. So that palm oils, I didn't realize this until I was doing more research into this. Palm oil is in dang near everything, from the actual palm oil you use for cooking to beauty products and things like that. To where palm oil plantations cover about 27 million hectares of the Earth's surface because it's cheap and it goes in everything. That illegal logging is happening. Apparently, the logs that you shouldn't be cutting down are just so much better than the ones you can cut down. I don't understand the logging industry exactly, but I get the concept. But essentially, what we are seeing is that illegal logging is just so profitable. It accounts for almost $150 billion of like the timber industry. So when we need to make furniture, when we need to build homes, when we need paper products, things like that, like 15 to 30% of all of our lumber is illegal. So and it comes down primarily to being able to enforce, oh, where'd you get that log? That sort of a thing. So that. And as we said, urbanization is happening. So when people are moving out of cities into the suburbs or out into the country or whatever, they need places to go. So we cut down what was once just natural land in order to accommodate those homes or those buildings, things like that. Eventually, one town or city just gets too big and someone's like, I'm just going to start my own town. So they just go and they start their own town. That's why you have Moorhead, Fargo, West Fargo, Horace so close to one another, because they seemed like hundreds of miles apart back when you had to walk the distance between the four. So deforestation is increasing because humans are increasing. Now, agriculture isn't always keeping up with us, which is like not fine, but fine, to where then we start to see people taking matters into their own hands or just going back to some roots that we have instinctively, with hunting. Okay, I don't understand hunting. I don't want to wake up and sit in a deer blind freezing my booty off without having to take a shower and all this or whatever. But you know what? Everybody has their hobbies. But we're starting to see over hunting really take a toll on our ecosystems, because we are reducing populations to a point of near extinction, if not extinct, depending on where we are hunting. We start to see a decrease in range of specific species. Therefore, interactions between it and another species in a different location lessen. We see altering of life cycles and traits. So essentially, if you're removing a large portion of the reproductively mature individuals of a specific species, you have missed years of population growth for them, and things like that. And then essentially the amount of food available for humans due to overpopulation, to where overfishing and hunting almost is necessary to sustain like the amount of food we need on our grocery shelves, to where it's going away. So because we're increasing in our population, we're starting to see things like animals decrease because we're consuming them at a rate in which they're not able to maintain. Now, granted, yes, we partake in deer season, and I swear to goodness, if there is a turkey in the middle of the road on my way to school today, I will hit it. And things like that. Because in certain areas, we do have species that their population is becoming overcrowded, to where we need to help maintain that. To where, yes, we have deer season, but throughout deer season, we have a very specific number of tags, or the amount of deer you can actually get, and the regulations of how large the deer is, the gender of the deer, things like that is so important, to where you get heavily fined. But we live in a country where we're able to sustain that sort of a thing. Overfishing. I don't know how many times I see DNR over on my mom's lake. And all this, you do have like some knowledgeable police officers stopping and talking to the little kids who are trying to fish in the river, just to remind them that you can fish, but it's a catch and release sort of a thing right now. Fishing opener, I don't believe, is until this weekend on the lakes in Minnesota. So yeah, like there's certain regulations that have to be put in place so that we don't hopefully kill off entire species, especially vital species to our habitats.
Oh,
excuse me, which then brings us into the practice of unsustainable farming. So because our population is growing at such a pace, we start seeing farmers taking matters into their own hands, where we start seeing a vast amount of different, or not different, we see a vast amount of animals crammed into as small a space as humanly possible. Okay, to where, yes, we get chickens on top of chickens just to get the eggs. And then this is how the bird flu spreads so easily, to where then we don't have access to eggs, and things like that. If you've ever driven through Frazee, Minnesota, so heading southeastish of Detroit Lakes, like, you see the giant half dome barns. Those are filled with turkeys. And all of that, to where we get these unsustainable farming practices that put not only the population of the animals at risk, but you do also put the health of people at risk. If we contract bird flu, our bodies are not really meant to fight it off. That's why we don't have a bird flu vaccine. But the whole idea is that they're trying to get as much product as possible with the smallest footprint possible. So that we see up here, our farmers do a really great job of it, but you used to have farmers who don't rotate their crops, meaning you go from a very nutrient heavy crop to a nutrient increasing crop every other. That's why you'll see like 1 or 2 years there'll be corn in the fields, and then a year or two later it'll be like soybeans. Same farmer, same field, different crops, because you have to replenish what you took out of the soil. And things like that, to where you get these unsustainable farming practices that they're just trying to keep up with the demand. And if you can make money, hey, you're gonna make money. It's just at the risk of everything else. So we start seeing unsustainable farming happening because of our human population increase. Now, when you start to put all of these stressors between water, air quality, food, like, you start putting all of that into a bowl, you start to boil and simmer over, because there is only so much of this in so many of us, to where we are seeing more and more strains within our developing countries. Okay, these are countries that aren't as well established as, say, the United States, a good portion of Europe, things like that, to where we see conflict start to happen. There has been over 110 conflicts in the past 5 years over resources, either two nations against each other or a nation within itself. So we start seeing those conflicts. We start to see more and more diseases starting to spread, because there's only so much that can be done. And then we start getting those really scary moments of starvation and people passing because they don't have access to resources that should just be a basic human need. So things like that, to where everything starts to boil over and no one can keep their cool that long. Okay? We have seen those crazy, like, Karen type people who are literally fighting each other over a carton of eggs or a roll of toilet paper. Like, those are things that we don't need. We don't need eggs. Yes, my family seems as if they need eggs, but we don't need eggs. We just need food. We don't need toilet paper, but if you want a clean booty, you do. But, like, those are things we don't need, versus things like water. Like, if you can only imagine. So, this is what starts to happen once we start depleting our resources to the point where we are kind of at. So, things to keep in your thoughts. I'm gonna have you end with this video. It's just kind of a good little, like, it is older, obviously. It says 7.6 billion and we're up to 8 some odd. But just to kind of see like what's going on in the world. Okay? You guys hear about it all the time if you watch like CNN 10 and things like that, but like it's just a good idea. Keep in mind. What can you do? So I'll leave you with that. If you have any questions, please reach out to your teachers. We're here to help. We want to support you. We want to answer whatever questions we actually can. I typically get asked a lot of questions I don't have answers for during this unit because the world doesn't really have answers for it during this unit. But I'll try my best. Phenomenal. Let me know if you guys need anything. Thank you.